Okay, so looks like we are live. It's been a little bit. We had to postpone. We're reading the rites. We're supposed to get it, the rest of it within that same week, but a bunch of events happened all at once to where we couldn't duly perform. And without further notice, and with no explanation, we did kind of just fall off and not, specify what was going on. I apologize for that. I figure now is the time. The time now is no better than any other, seeing as we've hit our daylight savings time and shit gets really dark really quick. It's goddamn crazy. That may be a little too loud. I don't know. Pull it right there. Hopefully that's good. Maybe overpowering, but as a recap, Ozzy was yet again going over his past. We were slowly going back to present day time. What thought was I? I was trying to make a complete thought there, a complete sentence, and while trying to scroll through the last rite and getting onto these excerpts, of which we will. I was gonna do just one a day, keep it simple. We'll hit two today, we'll hit one tomorrow, and we'll hit one excerpt the next day, the following. So we'll hit two excerpts tomorrow, Tuesday. We'll do one last excerpt on Wednesday with final closing thoughts, the outro. We'll finally get through the words and the will of John Micheal Osbourne so that he may finally rest in peace, knowing that his audience, his fans, friends, family were able to hear his final thoughts and stance on basically his life and where he got to. So I don't have anything of importance to say. We'll get on with it. We were the last time that we stopped off. We were at Dead by Christmas, and now we are on Bang v. Whimper. That's acting very weird, but okay. Bang v. Whimper. A global pandemic. Of course, there was a global pandemic, with a travel ban and a 10th month lockdown to go with it. And all because someone in the town of Wuhan, China, supposedly ate a fucking hell, man. Of all the bullets I've ever dodged, not catching some mutant virus from that bat in Des Moines has got to be right up there. Until COVID came along, I had no idea that was even possible. I thought rabies was the biggest risk. My blood runs cold just thinking about it. Could you imagine? If I had caused a worldwide outbreak in 1982, people would be burning effigies of me instead of Guy Fawkes. Having said that, I've had a hard time believing the pandemic really was started by someone eating a bat. I mean, okay, there was a wet market in Wuhan where people supposedly bought live bats and pangolins and whatever to make dodgy soup out of. But there was also a virus lab in the same town just across the river. And you're seriously telling me it's the wet market that's to blame? Yeah, right. Then again, what do I know? The first stay-at-home order in LA came 7 days after we got back from the clinic in Panama. Like everyone else, we thought it would maybe last a week or two. Next thing we all knew, all the supermarkets had been cleaned out and the whole world had been shut down. It was really exciting, weirdly exciting for a minute. Like living in an apocalypse movie. But when the news started coming in of people dying everywhere, the vibe in the house turned grim. What I couldn't wrap my head around was why people were panic buying toilet paper, not food. Do they think we're being attacked by an army of arseholes? I said to Sharon, because it didn't make any sense. Thanks to my Parkinson's, I was considered a high risk of COVID in those early days. I'd caught the original strain, which went straight for your lungs. There was a good chance I could have ended up on a ventilator or worse. That's because Parkinson's affects your breathing muscles, along with all your other muscles, which makes you more likely to come down with pneumonia even in normal times. I've also got a bit of emphysema from my smoking days, which didn't exactly help. And of course, there was no vaccines back then, and no one had any kind of natural immunity. Nowadays, COVID is weaker but more easily spread, or so I'm told, and it tends to go from your upper airways, making it less dangerous. Our house became like the set of the Andromeda strain once we got our hands on some protective gear. People were walking around wearing masks and gloves, even full-on face shields. Thanks to the constant swabbing and testing, I was putting more shit up my nose than I had since the making of Volume 4. Early on, I got a false positive that said I had the virus, then 10 minutes later, another test said I was in the clear. I had better mornings, I'll say that much. As the weeks went by, it became horribly clear just how devastating the lockdowns were for venues, musicians, and crew. People were going broke all over the place, on top of getting the virus. I tried to do my bit to help out, working with a group called Sweet Relief to raise cash for people in the music game who were struggling. I can't tell you how lucky I felt that I was still out on the road, trying to make ends meet. The pandemic had happened during the early days of Sabbath. Before we made any money, we'd have been fucked. Obviously, there was no way I was going to fly to Switzerland for the immunotherapy thing. Even if we'd been allowed to go, we didn't want to run the risk of getting COVID while we were away and not allowed back in the country. Getting the second opinion on my spine had to be postponed. Anything medical related that wasn't urgent, you could forget about it. It was all hands on deck. I remember watching the telly with Sharon and seeing all these refrigerated trucks outside a hospital in New York because they had nowhere to put the bodies. It's easy to forget just how freaky that was. Those were some dark days, man. By early summer, we have sort of settled into a pandemic routine. I gotta admit, I kind of enjoyed the silence that ascended over LA. For the first time ever, you could see the stars at night. The smog disappeared. You couldn't hear any cars. Even the planes stopped going overhead. At some point, me and Andrew got back to work on the follow-up to Ordinary Man. The title we came up with was Patient Number 9. We were going for a mental hospital vibe, because I'd always been fascinated by those places. I've also been in and out of a few institutions over the years, and of course my spine injury and Parkinson's made me feel like a walking medical experiment, which also played into it. I got really comfortable working with Andrew. He even started calling me and Sharon Mom and Dad, which was a bit cheeky. but at least he could keep his sense of humor through it all, apart from the times he and Sharon had screaming arguments, that is, and they had a few, although they always made up after. The pandemic was a big strain on all of us. It was easy to get dragged down, especially if you watched the news. Meanwhile, Sharon's TV show moved to Instagram Live, so she was working again. Then after a few weeks, she started using the Zoom app and did every episode from home. By September, she was back in the studio. In a weird way, the lockdowns didn't change much for me. I'd been kind of a lockdown for a year already thanks to all that time in the ICU. Then bed at home, and very selfishly, it made me feel less guilty for canceling those tour dates, because no one could work. Although obviously I didn't wish that on anyway, because people's livelihoods were being destroyed. To pass the time between recording sessions with Andrew, I got back into shooting air rifles in a big way. I've always had air rifles, me. The ones in America, they're nothing like your average 177 BSA. If you aren't familiar, BSA stands for the Birmingham Small Arms Company, although I'm told it's now owned by an American company. Saw this guy on YouTube take down a 2,000-pound bison in Texas with one. They never let you buy a rifle that powerful in England. If you ever tried to bring one into the country, you'd end up in prison. Shooting has always been very therapeutic for me. Ever since I lived at Bulrush Cottage. There's a picture out there somewhere of me standing in the field behind the house, looking stone out of my mind, holding a cocked rifle with an ammo belt slung over my shoulder. English gun laws were a lot less strict than the 70s if you owned a bit of land. I'd shoot anything in those days. I'd sent quite a few chickens off to meet their maker, which I ain't proud of, and I blew the head off this 7-foot-tall stuffed grizzly bear my old manager gave me. I'd also buy department store mannequins, tie them to a tree in the garden, and execute them at dawn. I was drunk most of the time. I was a danger to myself and to society, honestly. One time, I tried jumping over a fence with a loaded shotgun in my hand, and I almost blew my leg off. Another time, when I was on acid, I pulled a gun on Bill. The chamber was empty, I think, but he had no way of knowing that. Then I went stumbling off into the fields and had a long conversation with a horse. The fact me and Bill survived the 70s honestly never ceases to amaze me. I only do target practice now. I don't care living things anymore. In fact, I've become an avid animal lover. I've done some bad shit in my life to all kinds of creatures, but when you get older, you realize everything's got a right to live. I rescue animals now, including a bulldog who was set on fire by his previous owner. His name's Walter and he's doing great. I can't tell you how happy it makes me to give an animal a good life. During that first summer of the pandemic, I built myself a whole shooting range in my back garden. I even made my own targets, cutting out those big circles, putting the dots in the middle, mounting them on cardboard, putting them on stands. I'd spend all day out there, and it drove my neighbor fucking crazy. He'd be sitting out by his pool or having a nice lunch on his patio, and these big bore air pellets would be singing over his head. The poor bloke must have felt like he was in a war zone. Mind you, the rest of LA was so bored during the lockdowns. People were setting off fireworks at all hours. At least I wasn't firing rockets at them. Before you knew it, 6 months had gone by since the lockdown began. It was coming up on October now when the European dates of No More Tours 2 were supposed to start. But with social distancing still in force and the COVID vaccine still not ready, there was absolutely no way anyone was going to be playing live. Not that I was in any state to travel anyway. We didn't want to cancel the shows like we had with the North American leg, but rescheduling them also seemed pointless because now no one knew how or when the world was finally going to get back to normal. In the end, we just said the tour would start up again in January 2022. That was more than a year away. Surely I thought the lockdowns couldn't go on that long. People were already getting restless and also doing crazy shit to let off steam. I felt like there'd be a revolution if they didn't let everyone get back to their regular lives. Meanwhile, with 16 months to recover, I kept up with physical therapy. If I kept up with physical therapy, it seemed impossible I wouldn't be ready to hit the road by then. Of course, after all the shit we've been through, I'd be lying if I said there wasn't some doubt in my mind. All those months spent hobbling around in the back garden gave me lots of time to think. And what I couldn't get out of my head was my old friend Lemmy Kilmister used to say, I'd rather go out with a bang than get old. Do you really mean that, Lemmy? I asked him once. Fuck yeah, I mean it, he said. What's the point of being 95 if you can't live? Well, I understand what he was getting at, but I didn't agree. I was happy to grow old as long as I had Sharon and as long as I had my family, as long as my family wanted me around. But now, thanks to my injury and my Parkinson's and all the nerve pain I was having, not to mention all the canceled shows, there were moments I wondered whether Lemmy had the right idea. I mean, what's the point of being alive if you can't enjoy it? For a long time after that first surgery, I wasn't living. I was just getting through the days. The only thing I had to think about was when my next pill's coming up. My darkest moments, I did wish I had gone out with a bang rather than ending up semi-paralyzed and stuck at home. Well, if it wasn't for Sharon and my family, I honestly don't know how I could have kept going. I'd have given up. Even though I was in a better place by now, I'd still get knocked down by depression sometimes. The thing is, you don't realize how lucky you've been until you lose the things you used to take for granted, like being able to use your right arm, or going for a stroll around the block on your own. Thinking about Lemmy never failed to cheer me up, though. I first met him when he was in Hawkwind. He played bass and sang. A lot of people ain't that familiar with Hawkwind because they never really broke through to the mainstream, but they had some seriously hardcore fans. They were big into phaser effects and all that space rock psychedelic stuff. But thanks to Lemmy, there was also a bit of pre-punk in there. Sabbath shared a rehearsal space with them for a while down in the Y Valley at Rockfeld Studios. This would have been around in '73, a couple of years before Queen went to Rockfield to record Bohemian Rhapsody, which really put that place on the map. The thing with Rockfield is, because it's on a farm in deepest South Wales, miles away from anywhere, you could get to know people pretty well when you're staying there. Me and Lemmy would spend hours outside in the rain with the livestock, smoking fags and shooting the shit while Lemmy swirled jet fuel or whatever the fuck it was he had in his hip flax. Even then, his voice was so rough he sounded like he'd been gargling with ball bearings and lighter fluid. And that was on a good day. He was an original, was Lemmy. The grease-stained black t-shirt and biker jacket, the bushy mutton chop sideburns and mustache, the bullet belts and cowboy boots. I don't think I ever saw him wear anything else. A couple years later, Lemmy got busted at the Canadian border for drugs. They thought his speed was cocaine, apparently. Then he left or got fired from Hawkwind. That's when he formed Motorhead. Apparently he wanted to call the band Bastard, but his management wouldn't let him because it meant they'd never get on the Top of the Pops. Not that Lemmy was exactly Top of the Pops material. He got the name Motorhead from a song he'd written for Hawkwind. It meant speed freak, apparently, but Lemmy assumed the BBC types as at Top of the Pops wouldn't know that. He was right, they had no idea. The greatest times I had with Lemmy were when Motorhead opened for us on my first solo tour in '80. Everything was on the line because I had just left Sabbath. We were playing anywhere they would have us. Pool Arts Center, Nottingham Boat Club, the West Runton Pavilion, wherever the fuck that was. And we blew the doors off of everywhere we went because we had something to prove, and we had Randy Rhoads, who was an unknown at the time. He wouldn't stay that way for very long, of course. Motorhead were on fire too, because they had just done Ace of Spades. That was their paranoid as far as I was concerned. I even got them on Top of the Pops. It even got them on Top of the Pops, so it was a good job Lemmy had and called the band Bastard. I mean, Ace of Spades is just one of the great metal anthems of all time. When that came out, I was like, okay, they've made it. They're going to be around forever now. They live like pirates, Motorhead. There were just three of them. Lemmy on bass and vocals, Fast Eddie Clarke on lead guitar, Phil Filthy Animal Taylor on drums. Their tour rider was a case of Jack Daniels, a case of vodka, and a buttload of Coke and orange juice. The rider cost more than their booking fee. Like, a lot more. The first thing I came to realize about those guys was they just didn't sleep. When they finished a gig, they'd come off the stage, soaked with sweat, no shower, no towels, nothing, and they'd just get on their bus, open up the case of Jack and go. Then they'd drive however many hours to the other end of the country, get off, and just carry on. I asked Lemmy once, when was the last time you went to bed, man? And he was like, I don't know, 10 days ago? It was nuts. I couldn't do it. Lemmy was the one guy I could just not keep up with. I didn't even want to try, man. It was catastrophic level of partying. Actually, there was another guy I couldn't keep up with. Andre the Giant. That was different. If you ever seen The Princess Bride, he's the guy who played the 7'4" character Fezzik. I met Andre when I did an appearance with the British Bulldogs wrestling team at WrestleMania a few years after Blizzard of Oz. Andre had a condition known as acromegaly. I believe, when you basically don't stop growing. He wasn't just tall, he was also heavy, like 500 pounds or something. That guy would drink whole jugs of vodka and cranberry, and while he was sitting there waiting for him to be made, he'd get through a 6-pack of beer. The guy was physically incapable of getting drunk. There's a story out there where he once drank 16 bottles of plum wine during a 4-hour bus ride when he got off and did 3 wrestling matches. Having been out with him a couple of times, I don't doubt it. Sadly, he didn't live very long. He died of heart failure at 46. With Lemmy, on the other hand, his secret weapon was speed. Speed and meth, which is bad stuff, man. It'll make all your teeth fall out. I asked him once, why do you do all the speed and meth all the time? Because I like it, he said. It'll kill you, you know. Life will kill you, he shrugged, lighting up another fag. Lemmy was always lighting up another fag. It was probably the first thing he did since after being born. I mean, okay, he admitted, maybe the drugs will kill me a bit earlier, but what's the point of 10 extra years if I'm bored shitless? As for why he chose speed, Lemmy said if you were going to get high, you might as well do it with a drug that also helped you keep working. Of course, no one but Lemmy could do anything while taking that shit. I tried some of it once. I was in a club, totally fucked up on booze, somewhere in London. Naughty Holder from Slade was jamming on stage. I'd known Naughty for years. He'd been Robert Plant's roadie in the early days, and Geezer knew him well. It was one of those nights he didn't want to end. And I'm bouncing around this club at 2 o'clock in the morning after God knows how many hours of drinking, with the exhaustion starting to set in. Then out of the darkness comes this dagger with some powder on the end. It's Lemmy. You'll probably want a bit of this, he goes. Fuck it, I thought. How bad can it be? Never again. It was like snorting fucking rust filings. I felt like I'd be having nosebleeds for the rest of my life, and I didn't sleep for days. How the fuck could he put up with this shit up his nose every night and keep working? I have no idea. People underestimated Lemmy, though. Because he looked like a biker, people thought he was some kind of yabo, the kind of guy who'd get into bar brawls or steal your wallet for drug money. But he was this peaceful, educated, highly intelligent man. On that first tour we had with him, he had this little plaid suitcase, and all he had in there was a pair of knickers, a pair of socks, and a pile of books on every subject you can imagine. He loved reading, Lemmy. He was like a walking Encyclopedia Britannica. We got on so well with Motorhead on the British and European legs of the Blizzard of Oz tour. They also joined us for the American shows. When we got to LA, we all went to stay at Don Arden's house, a big Spanish-style mansion at the top of Benedict Canyon. Howard Hughes had once owned it, apparently. Cary Grant lived in the house next door and had all these bungalows around the grounds for guests to stay in, like a resort. We couldn't get Lemmy out of the library. He'd just stay up all night doing speed and reading books. Don was like, "Who the fuck is that caveman in my library? Get him out of my house." Sharon had to explain to him that he was the lead singer of the support band. Meanwhile, whenever Lemmy had a hangover, which was rare for him because his tolerance was off the charts, he'd say he had a heavy night on the chemistry set. At Don's house, I saw him emerging from his room after one of those nights. Looked like he had been dug up after 500 years under a slab. He stank, his eyes were redder than a bulldog's, and the first thing he said to me was, "Fucking hell, Ozzy, if I look half as bad as you, I'm going bad to bed." I almost called an ambulance for us both. Many years after the Blizzard of the Oz tour, I bumped into Lemmy in Japan. We must have been on tour there. It was towards the end of the 80s by then, and I was starting to write the No More Tears album. "How's it going, Ozzy?" he asked. "Not well," I said. "How come?" "It's the lyrics for the new album," I groaned. "What do you mean?" "I'll know what I want a song to be about," I told him, "but I can never get past the first line." "Well, if you want, I'll help," he said. I couldn't say yes fast enough. The thing with Lemmy was he'd read so many books, words came naturally to him. He had a gift for it, honestly, and I know he'd written for other artists, including Can't Catch Me for Lita Ford. That was on the same album as the duet I did with her, Close My Eyes Forever. On the plane back to LA with that first conversation, some guy came up to me in first class and gave me a book about a German general. I didn't have the heart to tell him I was never going to read it, not because I wasn't interested. I love history, especially anything war-related. I must have watched every Second World War documentary that's ever been made. It's my dyslexia and ADHD make my reading a form of torture. Then I thought to myself, you know who will like this? Lemmy. A few days later, I went over to Lemmy's place to give him one of the demos for the songs that needed words. He had this bachelor pad in West Hollywood just around the corner from his local, the Rainbow on the Sunset Strip. He was like the mayor of that place. He had his own seat at the bar with a plaque on it that said Lemmy's Chair. Spent hours there drinking his Jack and Cokes and playing the video poker machine in the corner. Then when it closed at 2 o'clock in the morning, he'd stagger back down the hill and around the corner to his place. His apartment was something else, man. It was like one step above a squat and one step below student accommodation. He never opened the curtains. There were ashtrays and empties all over the place, and he had Nazi shit everywhere. Hitler Youth daggers, Iron Cross flags, SS uniforms. It was like the set of the Young Ones crossed with the Imperial War Museum. He wasn't a Nazi, obviously. I only collect the stuff, I don't collect the ideas, he used to say. He was just fascinated by that piece of history. I'm the same way, and I'm married to a Jewish woman, so I hardly share the opinions of Adolf Hitler. You gotta remember, we grew up right after the war, so it was still a very recent memory. In Aston, when I was a kid, entire streets were still in ruins after the Birmingham Blitz. In the fields, there were still concrete pillboxes everywhere, so the Home Guard could defend the country if Hitler invaded. And everywhere had a friend whose dad had seen action somewhere or other. The bottom line is, if you're interested in dark subjects, the Nazis and the terrible things that they did are the darkest of them all. That didn't mean Lemmy was going around doing Sieg Heils and goose stepping. The first demo I gave him for Mama I'm Coming Home, I'd had the melody in my head for years. Then me and Zach had sat down at the piano and worked out the whole song. But I didn't have a clue what the words should be. "Take a listen to this," I said, "and see if anything comes to you." Then I remember the book I'd been given on the plane. "Oh, and do you want this?" I said, showing him the cover. "It's about some German bloke." "Okay," said Lemmy, lighting up his 700th fag of the day. "Leave the demo with me, and yeah, I'll take the book. Cheers." "When do you need the lyrics?" "As quickly as you can," I said. "Okay, come back in 2 hours." "You're joking." "What?" You need them faster? What? No. Fucking hell, Lemmy. How are you going to write these lyrics in just 2 hours? It's not War and Peace, Ozzy. It's a song. Give me 2 hours. Alright, if you say so, I said. I didn't think he was serious. I was fully expecting to come back and find he'd written half a verse then fucked off to the rainbow. So I left him to it. Came back 4 or 5 hours later just to be on the safe side. I walked in the door and he goes, "Where the fuck have you been?" Then he hands me the sheet of lined paper with the lyrics carefully written out in longhand with a couple of fag burns at the top. "Here you go." I looked at what he'd written and my mouth fell open. "Times have changed and times are strange. Here I come, but I ain't the same. Mama, I'm coming home." As anyone who's close to me knows, Mama is one of my pet names for Sharon. And Lemmy had somehow managed to capture the beautiful fucked up madness of our relationship and our life on the road, which I had just tested to the breaking point by getting fucked up on booze and pills and attacking her one night with these words. I got chills as I was reading it. It was like he'd been able to peer into my soul. Later on, whenever I sang the song on stage, I'd have the same reaction. I had tears running down my face by the time I got to the end. "Lemmy, I just don't know what to say," I said. "You don't like them?" He shrugged. "That's okay, I wrote 2 other versions." Then he handed me 2 other sets of handwritten lyrics for the same song. I just stood there looking at them in the state of total disbelief. "Oh," he said, "and that book you gave me? Yeah? It's crap." "What? You couldn't possibly have..." "Here you go," he said, shaking the fag ash off of it and handing it back to me. "You already finished it." Lemmy ended up writing 4 songs on No More Tears, Mama, I'm Coming Home, I Don't Want to Change the World, Desire, and Hellraiser. Later on, he said he'd earned more in publishing royalties from the 4 songs than he did from his entire Motorhead career. I have mixed feelings about that. I've got to check something because I thought that was on there. I don't know why that stops. Because I don't have that. Never mind. Yeah, don't have Mr. Tinker Train, none of that. On the one hand, I was very glad he got to earn some dough. On the other hand, if it's true, Motorheads deserve a lot more recognition. One of the many things I liked about working with Lemmy was that he was totally honest with his opinions. You'd play him something, and if you didn't like it, he'd go, "That's shit." He'd tell you straight. There was no sugarcoating with Lemmy, and he had the best sense of humor. And one of his own songs was called Killed by Death. As far as great titles go, that's right up there with Death at a Funeral, the Frank Oz movie. After No More Tears, we worked together a few more times. Other than Mama, the song of ours I really love, also written with Zach's help, is See You on the Other Side. It's on the Osmosis album. The title's a reference to a standing joke we had whenever we were getting fucked up, along the lines of which one of us will live to see to tomorrow morning. Mind you, a lot of people back then thought we'd live forever. You'd hear stand-up comedians saying things like, "What kind of world are we going to leave for Lemmy, Ozzy, and Keith Richards?" In the end, I gotta say, it wasn't a total surprise that I outlived Lemmy. There came a point where I slowed down. He never did. He kept the pedal to the metal, even when he could see the brick wall up ahead. His lack last gig was in Berlin just a couple of weeks before he died in LA. The last time I saw him on a plane going to Rio must have been April 2015. We were doing the Ozzy and Friends tour in South America. Motorhead were part of it. Geezer and Slash were there. Lemmy was sitting up at front, so we didn't have much of a conversation or anything. He dropped so much fucking weight, man. I remember walking down the jetty thing when we got off, and his legs, he had his cowboy boots on, and his legs were like sticks inside. Yeah, I'm probably going to die, he said to me at one point during that trip. But I never thought I'd make it this far, so I did good. As far as I'm concerned. He was 69 at the time, turning 70 on Christmas Eve. It was the cancer that got him. He was riddled with it. I saw the same thing happen to my father after a lifetime of breathing in all kinds of toxic shit at the GEC factory where he worked. But as Lemmy himself said, the fact he lasted as long as he did, and he lived his entire life like he was 20 years old, was quite an achievement. When we got back to LA, I heard from friends that his health was declining. I was texting him all the time. If you need anything, call me. Text right back. Thanks for caring. A week before his 70th birthday, just after he got back from Berlin, they held a concert for him at the Whiskey A Go Go. Slash was there, Billy Idol, Lars Ulrich. After that, Lemmy was pretty much bedridden. Apparently, the Rainbow unplugged the video poker machine from the bar, and it took it over to his flat. Meanwhile, he cut down on the fags. He'd switched from Jack and Coke to vodka and orange juice, but he was still doing the old speed. And when he made it to 70, God bless him, but 4 days later, he was gone. I phoned him on the day he died. I kept wanting to talk to someone who was with him, but whoever was there just kept putting Lemmy on the line. I couldn't talk at that point. All he could do was groan down the line at me. I kept asking, is Lemmy okay? Can someone give me an update? Well, all I got were these groans in return. It was fucking awful. I really truly hope he wasn't in too much pain. I had to hang up in the end. I thought to myself, I'd rather remember him as I want to remember him. It was so frustrating and sad. But a few hours later, the news came through. We lost him. But he made his mark, man. The patio at the Rainbow is called Lemmy's Lounge now. There is apparently a statue of him there, and Ace of Spades will never, ever get old. Meanwhile, he had his ashes put in bullet casings and sent out to all of his friends. God bless you, Lemmy. You are a warrior and a legend. I'll see you on the other side. Aside from Levy, I had the privilege of hanging out with a few of other great Hellraisers in rock and roll history. But what people don't realize is, in those early days of Sabbath, I was a sensible one, relatively speaking. Take the one and only occasion I spent time with Keith Moon from The Who. I'd been invited to some charity concert in Coventry that Tony had helped organize. Moon was there because Tony had made friends with him when they both played the Rolling Stones Rock and Roll Circus in '68. That was during the 5 minutes when Tony was in Jethro Tull. Now, my favorite thing to wear in those days was a tasseled suede shirt I bought home from America. I thought it was the bee's knees, that shirt. I wear it with a matching suede tobacco pouch clipped to my belt, and a necklace with a tiny Coke spoon on the end. I couldn't have been much older than 23 at the time. I thought I thought I was this sophisticated, worldly rock star, but really I was still a wide-eyed kid. Moon was already pretty arsehole when we got there, even though it was early in the day. What you've got to remember is, not only was he a couple of years older than me, but he was also on a different level entirely. The Who had been going for 5 years by then, and Who's Next had just come out with Won't Get Fooled Again on it. They were at their peak. On top of that, Moon was known for being one of the craziest fuckers on the face of Earth. 2 or 3 years earlier, at his birthday party, he'd driven a Lincoln Continental, the then equivalent of a Rolls Royce, into a Holiday Inn swimming pool, just for a laugh. Moon hadn't come to the charity thing alone. He brought his mate Viv Stanshall from the Bonzo Dog Doo Dah Band. Another 5-stage nutter. This would have been just before Stanshall did the track on Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells, where he just walks around a country house shit-faced. All I remember is being in the canteen of whatever this venue was, with all these kids running around. Maybe that's what the event was for, a kids' charity. And Moon and Stanshall sitting there on the floor, completely arseholed, falling about laughing, ripping the piss out of anyone who walked by. I felt so intimidated by them. They were these huge rock stars, and I was still the new kid on the block, you know? And of course, the second I walked in there, my shirt caught Moon's attention. He kept coming up to me and going, "Hey man," in his fake hippie accent. "You look so cool in that shirt, man. You really do, man." Over and over again. He just wouldn't get off my case. Neither would Stanshall. Meanwhile, I was totally sober, because in those days I wasn't in the habit of getting loaded at a kids' charity event at 11 o'clock in the morning. Eventually, I managed to lose him, but by then, during the rehearsal for the gig later on, I was standing on the side of the stage and Moon spotted me. Fuck, I thought. But now, on top of doing the whole "hey man" thing, he'd run up to me and just put his hand in my pouch. The first time, I kind of smiled and brushed him off, but he kept doing it and doing it, finding it funnier and funnier until eventually he was starting to piss me off. "Hey man, will you just fuck off?" I almost decked the guy. They're a pair of clowns, Moon and Stanshall. Looking back, I suppose they were giving me a taste of my own future medicine, because it wouldn't be long before I caught up with them and became a clown myself. They do all kinds of outrageous shit, I've since learned, like dressing up in Nazi uniforms before going out on the town. Meanwhile, Moon once tried to put his waterbed in a lift so it would explode when it got to the lobby. And of course, he loved food fights and throwing TVs out of hotel windows. Also blowing up toilets with M80 firecrackers, something I also came to enjoy, which I'll get to in a minute. But I wasn't in on the joke that day, and thank God for that. I mean, imagine if Moon the Loon, Stanshall, and me had become drinking buddies. We'd have been the dynamic trio. None of us would have lived to see 73. Moon was an electrifying drummer, of course. I mean, my generation. Fucking hell. No one was playing drums like that in 65. He was like this wild animal, but so precise at the same time. Not that I was ever a crazy fan of The Who, but Pete Townshend always had a good vibe. I actually got to meet him once at Sabbath's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction. We were crying with laughter. We were having such a good time. Moon tragically didn't make it to the end of the 70s because of his accidental overdose, but in some ways, it's amazing The Who even survived the 60s. Very few bands were as famous as they were during that decade and kept it going for as long as they did. And the 60s cost a lot of people their minds. I never knew Syd Barrett from Pink Floyd, who famously went crazy, which apparently inspired their Wish You Were Here album, but I'll never forget the time I ran into Peter Green from John Micheal and the Blues Breakers, and later Fleetwood Mac, at an awards show in London. What year this was, I honestly can't tell you, but I hadn't seen Green out in public for years. No one had, because he quit the music game and became a grave digger. He also wanted nothing more to do with music, apparently, but I don't know why he was even at this event. And he walks in wearing a handkerchief on his head with 4 knots on top. It was just very odd. I heard from someone in the business he was still getting pretty big royalty checks, but he kept sending them back to the record company saying, "I don't want these, fuck off." We got a check for 40, probably 1,000. 40 grand. He was like, "You really gotta stop sending me this shit." He must have been very sad for the guy's friends and family, not to mention his bandmates. He was still there, but he was gone. Within a couple of years of that charity thing, I was drinking far more often and far more heavily. And any kind of event, no matter what time of the day it was an excuse to get lollied. Even though I didn't see Moon or Stanshall again, I did run into John Entwistle, the Who's bass player. I was in London. I remember at the time I was very friendly with the comedian Billy Connolly. I'd got to know him while we were on the road because often we'd stay at the same places. This was when he was still drinking and doing powder. He gave all that shit up in the early 80s when he met his wife Pam. On this occasion, though, he was still at it. He was having a big book launch party. If I had to guess, it would have been for a collection of those comic strips he did at the time called The Big Yin. Now, in those days, I'd often while away on an afternoon in London doing blow and drinking beer in our manager's office. I'm not sure, probably British slang. I'd often while away. Either that or it's another typo. Which is exactly what I had just done. So by the time I got to this book launch, which started at 5 on a weekday, I was absolutely shit-faced. This event was on the basement level of some bar or restaurant, I remember. I was staggering down the stairs just as Entwistle was coming up. He stopped me as we passed. "Do I know you from somewhere?" he asked. "Maybe," I said. "I'm the singer of a band called Black Sabbath." He just went, "Oh yes," and carried on. That was it. My one encounter with Entwistle. Next thing I knew, I was in this hot and loud basement packed full of journalists and celebrities. Suddenly, I'm starting to feel absolutely knackered and next level loaded at the same time. And I'm standing beside this huge board thing, like a frieze, maybe even displaying pages of the book. I don't know, and I'm so tired. I start to lean against it. I thought I was part of the building, not something that could fall over. Of course, I go crashing right through this thing, hit the floor with a wallop. This huge display collapses on top of me. I'm lying there covered in bits of foam and cardboard and whatever. And the metal posts were holding it up all are rolling around the floor. All I remember is looking up and seeing this crowd forming around me. Everyone's still chatting away and eating nibbles and holding their champagne glasses. Then out of the crowd comes the face of one of the most famous men on earth, the footballer Bobby Moore, who captained the England team back when they beat Germany in the World Cup. "Oh, hello there," he goes. Then he fucks off again as I'm groaning and trying to get back to my feet. This was the first time my drinking really started to cause me problems in public. There's no looking back after that. I was off to the races. Although in the 70s, it wasn't so much the drinking itself that was the problem. It's just things that I said I did when I was drinking. And it was during our tours of America that it started to get out of hand. But none of us in Sabbath could really get over was how easy it was to buy cherry bombs in America. Or M80s as they were called over there. Except like everything else in America, M80s were far more powerful than any kind of firework they'd ever let you buy in England. I mean, the American military would use them as practice bombs. They packed that much of a punch. And you could buy these things just about anywhere. Meanwhile, the only limit on how many you could buy in one go and how much cash you had, and how many they had stocked. The likes of Keith Moon were buying 500 at a time. If you try that today, they think you were a domestic terrorist. So you can't buy M80s today because they're illegal now, which in all honesty they should have been all along. I mean, yeah, you can be safe if you use them carefully, but no one was using them carefully. People used to fuck around. The first trick I learned with an M80 was to extend the fuse wire and hook up to something else, so the explosion would go off on a delay. For example, you could poke a hole halfway down the side of a cigarette, stick the end of an M80 fuse wire into it, and then light the cigarette and leave it in an ashtray. And of course, the cigarette would eventually burn down to the fuse, which would then set off the explosive. The fucking clatter it made was unbelievable. It really does sound like a bomb going off. People would be sitting there on the sofa smoking dope and being all 70s and mellow, talking about love and the vibration of the universe or whatever, and then suddenly this whole room would shake as this mini stick of dynamite detonated on the table. I laughed so hard, man, but looking back, what the fuck was I thinking? I probably gave a few people PTSD. Not to mention the damage of their eardrums. And of course I was handling all this flash powder while I was out of my skull. Smoke bombs were another great way to prank people. In those days, nothing was more amusing than throwing a smoke bomb into the shower while a roadie was in there singing to himself and washing his hair. At first, they just think it was the steam. Then suddenly they realize they couldn't see anything, and they try and get out of the shower. But they'd be walking the walls and inhaling all the smoke, totally freaking out. We kept doing it to this one poor guy every single time he took a shower, and it just got funnier and funnier. He got exposed to so much smoke, all of his rings turned black. That was when we realized we should probably stop. Again, I don't know how we were thinking. Could have killed the fucker. Now let's not forget the bottle rockets. Those things were deadly. They were like cheap firework you could stick in an empty pop bottle and light it, then whoosh! It would shoot up into the sky, and a few seconds later, bang! I mean, you can only imagine the fun we had with those. Mainly by turning them sideways and firing them down hotel corridors. Between the bottle rockets, the M80s, and the smoke bombs, everywhere we were staying ended up looking like downtown Beirut. Of course, not everyone saw the funny side. I remember one time in this hotel, and I had bottle rockets in my hand, and I was about to fire it down the corridor towards Bill's room when I heard, "Freeze, motherfucker!" And I turned my head, and I saw a cop standing there with his gun raised, but it was too late. The fuse was lit, and the thing went off. Whoosh! All I could do was apologize. "Oh, I'm very sorry, officer." Bang! With that, Bill bolted out of his room screaming, running smack into a wall because he couldn't see through the smoke. Then all the fire alarms went off. I spent the night in jail. The closest call I had, though, was in Honolulu. I bought a whole bag of M80s, and I had them at my feet in this rental car as a roadie was driving around me. We weren't going anywhere in particular. We were just bored and killing time before a gig. Seeing the sights, smoking a bit of the local weed, drinking a few of the beers I had in the crate on my back seat. Meanwhile, to entertain myself, I was lighting those M80s and throwing them out the car window. Not the cleverest idea. I thought it was hilarious to make the cars behind us honk and swerve as those little bombs went off in the middle of the road. "Ozzy, stop doing that," the roadie kept saying. "You're causing an accident." "No, I won't," I said. Bang. "I was driving fast enough." Bang. "Seriously, Ozzy, just stop." "Oh, okay then." Bang. "Ozzy." Bang. I was getting tired by this point, so I was like, okay, my last one. But just after I lit the fuse and chucked the M80 out of the car, the roadie hits the brakes and stops the car. "What the fuck are you doing?" I said. I twisted around to watch the M80 hit the side of the curb, bounce off of it, and roll under this incredibly long, chromed-out old American stand behind us, which had also stopped. Worse than that, inside the sedan, I could see four heavy-set, scowling Hawaiian dudes with long hair, no shirts, and what looked like prison tattoos. They were all smoking cigarettes and shooting the shit, totally unaware of what was just about to happen. "Drive!" I screamed. "Just fucking drive!" "It's a red light," said the roadie. "I told you to stop throwing those things. Jump it! Jump the light before the cherry bomb goes bang!" Fuck, I was sweating bullets now. Meanwhile, in the rearview mirror, I could see smoke billowing out from underneath the sedan. The whole car just disappeared in this white cloud for a few seconds. Then all four doors opened, and the Hawaiians got out. They looked fucking pissed. "Get down," I hissed to the roadie. "Get down in your seat." In the wing mirror, I watched as this Hawaiian guy started peering under their car and checking out their exhaust pipe, which, what the fuck, had caused such a loud explosion, and where all the smoke was coming from. A few seconds passed. For a moment, I thought we were going to get away with it. The Hawaiians were just shrugging at each other as the smoke turned to blow away on the breeze. But then this young blonde American woman comes running out of the strip mall by the side of the road, waving her arms around to get the attention, and she starts pointing at me going, "It was him. He did it. He threw a bomb under your car." Now all four Hawaiian dudes notice me staring at them, the reflection of the mirror, then they nod at each other and start walking slowly towards our car. I had no idea if they had guns or knives or what, and I had no intention of finding out. "Drive! Drive! Drive!" I started screaming at the roadie, who was just sitting there frozen in panic. He gripped the wheel, looking dead ahead. "It's a red fucking light. Jump it! Jump the light! Jump the fucking light! We'll die." He wasn't wrong. Zoom! Zoom! The cars, trucks, buses, motorbikes, you name it, barreling through this intersection on both sides. It was a busy road, but I spotted a couple of gaps. "We're gonna die anyway. Jump the fucking light! Go, go, go!" The Hawaiian guys had split up by now, ready to jump for us from either side. "Hey, you motherfucker!" I heard. "What the fuck you throw at our..." Vrah! Finally, the roadie stomped his foot to the floor, closed his eyes, screamed at the same time, and by some incredible stroke of blind, dumb luck, the car wheeled out into the intersection on a black trail of rubber at the exact same moment the light turned green. I almost cried. When I looked back, the Hawaiians were standing there in the middle of the road, choking on our exhaust fumes as the cars behind them honked to get past. I decided to take it a bit easier on the M80s after that. There was a moment when it finally sunk in just how easy it was to kill yourself by living the way I did. It was after Bon Scott and John Bonham died within months of each other in 80. Not that it stopped me drinking or doing coke every 5 seconds, but it made me more careful. And I never actually went drinking with Bon, which was probably so well, but Sabbath used to tour with AC/DC, so I got to know him pretty well while we were out on the road. Some lead singers in those days would be a pain in the fucking ass, to be completely honest with you, but Bon was the opposite of that. He was just this nice, funny, very down-to-earth guy, and what a great singer. To me, as much as Brian Johnson did a great job of taking over for him, he'll always be the voice of AC/DC. I was in Australia when we first met up with them. This would have been 74 when they were opening for us during an event called British Rock and Roll Month. Uriah Heep and Status Quo were part of it. I didn't know what to make of AC/DC at first. When I first saw Angus Young put on his short trousers and schoolboy cap and walk out on the stage with his guitar around his neck and a knapsack on his back, I gotta admit, I thought, what a weird thing. He reminded me of Jimothy Clitheroe, a comedian from when I was growing up. Clitheroe's whole thing was dressing like a schoolboy even though he was a grown man. He had some kind of genetic disorder apparently, so he was the size of an 11-year-old boy. Angus is on the shorter side too, of course, but nothing like that. Second Angus wanted to play, though, it all made sense. What he did with a guitar is so clever, man. It seems simple, but it's not. He knows how to get the meat out of those 6 strings. It's just pile drives that fucking thing. Then when he gets out there and works himself up, fucking hell. No wonder the guy never got any taller. At the end of the show, he doesn't have a drop of sweat left in him. It's like he runs a marathon, night after night. I love the guy, as a person and as a performer. He's great. The one unfortunate thing that happened with AC/DC came a few years later when they were opening for us in Switzerland on the Technical Ecstasy Tour. Geezer just got himself a flick knife, and he thought it was great to flick it all the time. And I said to him, Geezer, you want to be careful about doing that. Do it in front of the wrong person at the wrong time. You might get pissed off. But it had become a habit by then, so Geezer kept doing it. And sure enough, me and Geezer and Angus' older brother Malcolm, who played rhythm guitar in AC/DC, but was also sort of the unofficial leader, was having a few beers in the room one night. Geezer starts flicking his knife and Malcolm gets pissed off. It happened in an instant. One minute we were sitting there having a chat, the next they were at each other's throats. All I remember is that they had a bit of a scuffle, and I had to break them up. I mean, like I said to Geezer at the time, AC/DC might be an Aussie band, but the Young family were from Glasgow, and they're Scots people deep down. They're fighters. Malcolm might have been only 5 foot tall like Angus, but he could scrap with the best of them, and he wouldn't back down. You didn't want to fuck with him. I don't know where Bon was when all of this went down, or the rest of Sabbath for that matter, but AC/DC had to leave the tour after that. Who made that decision? I don't know, but Malcolm never forgot it. I mean, he did at the end, unfortunately. He forgot everything. Many years after that tour, he moved into a place near mine in Buckinghamshire, and he would come over every so often. But as time went on, I started to get the feeling the lights were on, but no one was in. Turned out he had dementia. It was sad, man. I was so concerned I asked Angus about it. I was just like, how's Malcolm doing? He got really pissed off. He didn't realize Malcolm lived right next to me, so he thought that news had got out or something. They're a very tight, very protective family. As for Bond, the last time I saw him was in the dressing room at Bingley Hall in Stafford. This would have been November 8th of 79. He had been fired from Sabbath and was only just starting... I had been fired from Sabbath and was only just starting to get my solo career together. They were touring to promote Highway to Hell, the album that took them to the next level, with Def Leppard opening for them. So I'm there shooting the shit with Bond, and I remember someone calling out, "You're on in 5 minutes," and Bond had this big glass of what I thought was Coca-Cola in front of him. Not a small glass, a big tall glass, and he picked it up, glugged it all down in one, and shuddered. "Are you going to need to piss after drinking that much Coke?" I said to him. "Jack and Coke," he said. "Not Coke." It's unbelievable. I thought that's a lot of Jack Daniels start flowing through your veins just as you're about to walk out on stage. It's a lot of alcohol to drink in one gulp, full stop. Even I would have taken it a bit easier, but I didn't think much more of it. I was too busy making my own way down to the side of the stage so I could listen to Angus tear into the opening riff of Highway to Hell as the kind of volume that could make your ears bleed. Dun-na, 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 dun, dun-na. Talk about an album anthem, man. After it came out, I remember thinking to myself, Bond's got the world at his feet. I was a lot closer with John Bonham than I ever was with Bond. In fact, I knew all the guys in Zeppelin from way back. It was Geezer who first introduced me to Robert at the time when Plant was wondering if he should join Zeppelin or the New Yardbirds as they were then, or stick with his own band. His own band was called Ob's Tweedle, if you can believe it. One night at Henry's Blues house, the club owned by our first manager, Jim Simpson, I saw Plant jamming with Bonham. This would have been early '68. Talk about chills, man. Even then, Bonham's right foot had so much speed and power, it sounded like he was firing artillery shells out of a machine gun. A year later, the rest of the world would get to hear it for themselves on Good Times, Bad Times. When he could do it with a single bass drum was bordering on physically impossible. Plant's voice was something else. The range, the wailing he could do, the sheer volume of it. I mean, you could hear the beginnings of Dazed and Confused on that night. He looked the part, too, with his golden curly hair and those tight trousers he wore that probably gave him an extra octave. He and Bonham were taking the blues in this totally new, much heavier direction, and was one of the most exciting things I'd ever heard. And that was before you added Jimmy Page on guitar and John Paul Jones on bass. Anyway, as the years went by and Zeppelin and Sabbath both took off, I realized Bonham lived within an hour of me, and we started going drinking together. He didn't just have a house, John. He bought an entire farm, like a real one with horses and chickens, and a prize-winning Hereford bull called Bruno. Old Hyde Farm, the place was called. It was near Cutnall Green in Worcestershire. It was 100 acres or something, at the top of a hill, so you got these amazing views over the countryside. Such a peaceful, beautiful place. I love going there. John was never happier when he was driving around on his tractor wearing his farmer's hat. John's dad, Jack, was also there a lot. He was a builder, and he was always hard at work renovating the old farm buildings. One of the reasons John drank so much, I heard later, was that he got so homesick for the farm and his family when he was touring on the other side of the world. To get to the main house, there was this long, winding driveway with a white picket fence alongside it. And at the end of the driveway, where it met the road, there was a pub. John didn't own the pub, but he might as well have. They let him in there any time of the day or night. The thing with John was, he was a great guy, sober, but I had the Jolly Juice and he was absolutely fucking nuts. He'd just drink himself to bits. He was also big into Quaaludes, which were called mandrakes in England. He had a whole plastic bag full of them. People took him to relax in those days. John's assistant was called Matthew. I remember, and we get him to drive us to the clubs in Birmingham in my XJ12, which is a Jaguar. One night, John got so annihilated when he came out of the club, he thought it was his car and tried to drive away without me. All I can remember is knocking on the window going, "John, this is my fucking car." Him just going, "Fuck off, I'm going home," locking the doors from the inside. At one point I thought I was going to have to get a cab back to Stefford, or sleep in a hedge. "John, this is my fucking car," I kept screaming at him. Finally, something clicked in his head. "Well, you should probably get in then, shouldn't you?" He said, unlocking the doors. I was close enough friends with John that I once trusted him with my entire stash of coke. I was about to leave the country to go on holiday with my wife and kids. We were going to this very expensive resort in the Canary Islands, I remember, all the way down off the northwestern coast of Africa. And I didn't want the drugs at home where the housekeeper or one of the roadies who were always coming and going might find them. So before I left, I put this massive bag of coke in the boot of the XJ12 and drove over to the old Hyde Farm. I found John in one of the workshops next to the barn he'd turned into a garage for his collection of antique motors. Will you look after this for me? I said, holding up the bag. Fuck's in there, he said. Waffle dust, I told him. They called it waffle dust back then because it made you talk so much. Holy shit, Ozzy, that's a lot of waffle dust. You know, can I put it in your safe cupboard? I've got to leave the country for a while. Alright, he said. You know where it is. I'll make sure no one touches it. Cheers, John, I said. Oh, you won. I remember feeling a bit weird about it as I drove back home to Stafford on the M6. There was nothing compared to how I felt once I got to the airport with my then wife and kids. Suddenly I was like, this fucker's gonna do my coke, then there will be nothing left when I get back. It was 10 or 15 grand worth of stuff in today's money. More to the point, it was extremely hard to get in England at the time. What the fuck had I ever thought John Bonham was the best custodian of a pile of cocaine big enough to march the Bolivian army to the moon and back? The second he gets a few pints in him, I thought he was going to be opening the bag, going around the town on my stuff. He'll be throwing around like confetti, giving it to the sheep. Half of the cotton green is going to be bouncing off the ceiling thanks to my coke. I thought I'd calm down and forget about it once we got to the Canary Islands, but no. For some reason, I got more and more upset about the situation. I was thinking about it when I was on the water slide with the kids. I was thinking about it when I was knocking about daiquiris and bottles of Guinness by the pool. I was even thinking about it when I had a romantic dinner with the missus on the beach. Eventually, she would ask me what was wrong. I couldn't think what to say. She really worried about the future of the world, you know, I said. I ended up going home early. I was in such a bad way. The second the plane touched down at Heathrow, I was running to the long stay car park. Then I drove at 110 all the way back to Old Hyde Farm. The entire journey, I thought all I could think was, it's gone. Gone. It's all fucking gone. 2 hours later, I was roaring up John's driveway. I didn't even switch off the engine or close the car door when I got to the barn. I just ran straight to the safe cupboard in the corner where I left the coke. Nearly ripped the doors off the hinges, rummaged around, throwing out hammers and chisels, whatever the fuck he kept in there. Then there it is. I saw a corner of the plastic bag. I pulled it up. Aha! I went. I knew it. Then, actually, hang on a minute. The bag still seemed full. Weighed it in my hand. I took a look inside. Weighed it again just to make sure. Yep, he hadn't touched it. Not a single bump. Couldn't believe it. John, my old friend, if you were reading this up there, I'm sorry I ever doubted you. 3 months after that night with Bond at Bingley Hall, I was at home in Stafford getting ready to head to the Ridge Farm Studios, start recording Blizzard of Oz. I don't remember if Randy was already there, or if he was still trying to get his visa or whatever. The phone rings. It's Jean, my big sister. You know a singer's been found dead in his car in London, she says. My blood ran cold. Who? I said. What's his name? Bon Scott. She was reading from the paper. With the band AC/DC. Do you know him? I didn't hear anything after Bond's name. I felt like I'd just been punched in the face. It freaked me the fuck out. I was like, but I just saw him. I also couldn't understand how it had happened. I mean, yes, I'd been surprised by him drinking. So much. Jack and Coke right before a show, but I didn't think he was that bad a drunk. Then he said he choked on his own vomit while he was sleeping. But in my world, at that time, that just didn't seem like something that would kill you. I used to puke in my sleep all the time. All over England, people were doing it every Friday and Saturday night without fail. They weren't all dying. So what had happened to Bond? I was in shock when I ended the call, and I felt so sad for him. I knew exactly how tired he must have been when it happened. How much pressure he must have felt, because I had been there myself when I was on the road. It toured a lot, AC/DC. When touring becomes a drag, when you're fed up with the constant checking in and checking out of hotels, all the hours on the bus, the bad food, the chemical toilets, the petty arguments, day after day, doing interviews, straining your voice, and grind you into the ground. When it's great, but if you don't take breaks, you can get into real trouble. The AC/DC song, It's a Long Way to the Top, if you want to rock and roll, sums it up better than I ever could. Bond spent 15 years on the road. He'd started out in '64 long before he joined AC/DC. Worked his ass off to make it, and with Highway to Hell, he finally got there at the age of 33, at the time of life when a lot of singers started to wonder if it'll ever happen. He's about to become one of the biggest rock stars on the planet. He had so much to look forward to, so much to give. It was an absolute tragedy what happened. Bond, we've missed you, man. And then 7 months later, another call. This time I was in Liverpool, on a payphone in the lobby of the hotel where I was staying, I believe. My wife was on the line, breaking the news that John had been found dead at Jimmy Page's house after a day and a night of heavy drinking during rehearsals. So apparently John Paul Jones had found him the following afternoon with the band's tour manager. They tried to wake him up, and they had to tell Robert and Jimmy. It must have been a terrible scene. I can't even imagine John's death shook me up that badly. He was only 32, and he left behind his wife Pat and their 2 kids, Jason and Zoe. Meanwhile, it was the end of Zeppelin. At the end of the year, they put a statement saying the loss of our dear friend and the deep respect we have for his family, together with the sense of undivided harmony felt by ourselves and our manager, have led us to decide that we could not continue as we were. He pushed it, John, he really had. He was a hard player. He'd just drink and drink and drink. Me, I'd drink, then I'd smoke a joint and pass out. John never stopped. On the day he died, he drank 40 shots of vodka, apparently, starting at breakfast. They said that because of the death was the same thing as Bond, choked on his puke in his sleep. And I heard that, I started to realize that how easily it can happen if you make a habit of drinking until you drop. But I thought I was a clever drunk. I thought I knew all the tricks to avoid that fate, even though I'd once fallen asleep in my Range Rover in the driveway of Bulrush Cottage. A very similar situation happened to the one that killed Bond. That was the night someone had to come out and put a sleeping bag over me. When I woke up, my eyes were frosted shut. I could have died of hypothermia, never mind choking on my own puke. When I met Sharon, on the other hand, she wouldn't stand for it. She'd break my balls every time. No one's ever going to think it's going to happen to him, she'd scream at me. You think Bond thought that this was how his night would end? Or John? Wake up, Ozzy. The message must have eventually got through, because after losing Bond and John, I started to sleep on my side, after sleeping on my back my whole life because of them. I still sleep on my side to this day, just in case I throw up. As for going out with a bang when you're young, the problem is everything you miss. Lemmy proved himself wrong in a way, because he had such a full life. I've had such a full life. But Bond and John left this world with so much still ahead of them. I wish they could have stuck around. Many years later, after they died, on a break between tours, I took a drive back to Old Hyde Farm. I pulled by the pub at the entrance to the driveway and just sat there, looking at the picket fence and all the rolling fields behind it. Last time I'd been there, John's dad one of the farm workers had just given the fence a fresh coat of white paint, but now it was all rotten and withered and peeling. The good times always end, I suppose, I remember thinking to myself, and sometimes far too soon. That is the end of Bang v. Whimper. I think we'll actually call it there for the night. I'll have to think, we'll start on, I've had a few tomorrow, and try and do Dr. Fix-It as well. Thanks for tuning in to the Postponement. We will continue this concession on the next stream tomorrow.